Captain Kira Raynaud stood in the dimly lit command center, her fingers hovering over the console as she watched the ancient alien script slowly unfurl on the holographic screen before her. Her team of archaeologists had barely scratched the surface of the ruins when they stumbled upon the strange artifact. At first, they thought it was just another relic, something mundane, an object that might be of historical interest but little more. But now, after weeks of painstaking work, it was clear this was no ordinary find. The holo-record flickered and distorted, its edges glimmering with blue light. The messages contained in the databanks of the long-dead civilization were encrypted beyond anything they'd ever encountered. Still, their efforts were paying off, the language now partially decoded, revealing fragments of something far more terrifying than Kira could have anticipated. The Armada, Kira whispered to herself, her voice a mix of awe and dread. The word repeated, its significance sinking into her mind. "We need to get this to the UGC. Now," said Dr. Niles Keller, the team's lead linguist, his voice tight with urgency. He was standing beside her, nervously scanning the holographic text. His eyes were wide with disbelief. "This isn't just a history lesson. This is—" Before he could finish his sentence, the ground trembled beneath their feet. A sudden violent shake reverberated through the ancient stone structure. The lights flickered, casting an eerie glow over the room. Kira's heart rate spiked. She exchanged a glance with Keller, then motioned for the rest of the team to prepare to leave. "What was that?" one of the younger archaeologists, Lieutenant Emma Ross, asked, her voice a mixture of concern and curiosity. "I don't know," Kira replied, her eyes narrowing. "But it doesn't feel like a natural disaster." The rumble continued, this time more intense, followed by a series of loud mechanical noises that echoed through the ruins. Kira's instincts kicked in. Something wasn't right. The team had been working in an uncharted area of the galaxy, far from the safety of UGC patrols. This was supposed to be a simple dig, but now it felt as if someone, or something, had been waiting for them to uncover this. "We need to get out of here," Kira ordered. "Everyone, pack up. Now." As the team scrambled to gather their equipment, the hum of energy grew louder. It felt almost like a heartbeat, pulsing through the ground beneath them. Suddenly, the stone wall to the right of them shifted, a massive rusted door grinding open with a deafening screech. A cold wind swept in, carrying with it the scent of stale air and something far more ancient, almost like the remnants of long-dead ships, abandoned for eons. Then the unmistakable sound of engines began to resonate through the chamber. Low, rumbling engines, as though something enormous had been awakened from a long slumber. "Captain," Ross shouted, her voice breaking through Kira's thoughts. "It's coming from outside the structure." Kira's breath caught in her throat. The ship, the Armada. It had been dormant for millennia, lost to time, and yet now it was stirring. The ancient fleet had awoken. The alarms on their gear began blaring, signaling that an unknown vessel was approaching the planet's surface. The air was charged with tension, the eerie hum intensifying. "Get to the landing site," Kira barked. "Move. Now." As the team made their way through the labyrinth of corridors, Kira's mind raced. Who had left the Armada here? And why had it been hidden away? The discovery of the Armada was no longer just a historical curiosity. It was a weapon with the power to wipe out entire star systems. The question was, had humanity's ancestors left it behind as a safeguard, or as a warning? A low, guttural roar echoed through the building. Something, or someone, was coming. The roar from the depths of the ruin faded, replaced by the sound of Kira's boots echoing against the hard stone. She sprinted toward the exit, adrenaline surging through her veins as she fought to keep her mind clear. Behind her, her team followed in frantic haste. The once calm and methodical dig now devolved into a scramble for survival. The distant hum of engines had intensified, and Kira could feel it in her bones. Something massive was moving out there, and it wasn't interested in waiting. They reached the landing pad, a flat expanse of rock jutting out from the cliffside, overlooking the planet's vast, barren landscape. Kira's shuttle was parked nearby, a small, unassuming craft meant for research and transport, not for combat. The ship's engines roared to life as she climbed into the cockpit, the others quickly following suit. "Are we sure this is a good idea?" Lieutenant Ross asked, her voice tense. "I mean, that sound. It's coming from something big, right?" "Whatever it is, we're not sticking around to find out," Kira said, punching in the coordinates for their return to the UGC fleet. "We're getting back to the Coalition, and we'll have backup in less than an hour." The shuttle lifted off, its engines humming against the thick air of the planet's atmosphere. Kira glanced over her shoulder at the ruins they'd left behind. She could barely make out the outline of the structure in the distance, but there was something else, something more unsettling. The lights of the ancient archive flickered once more, an eerie reminder that whatever had been awakened down there was still stirring. Her comms crackled to life. "Captain, this is command. We've received your distress signal. What's going on down there?" Kira leaned into the controls, steering the shuttle upward as she spoke. "It's worse than we thought. We've uncovered something. An ancient fleet of warships. The Armada. It's not just a relic. It's active. Active." The voice on the other end stammered. "Impossible. We thought the Armada was a myth. No records suggest." "Believe me, it's real," Kira interrupted. "And it's waking up. Something triggered it, and we need to know what. But I don't think we're alone down there. We were attacked by an unknown force. Ships, fast, and hostile. I don't know who they are, but I'm certain they're after the Armada too." The silence on the other end lasted too long. Kira could practically hear the wheels turning in the mind of the officer back at UGC Command. "We're sending a fleet to your coordinates," the officer finally replied. "Get back here safely, Captain. This changes everything." The connection ended abruptly, leaving Kira with more questions than answers. She focused on guiding the shuttle toward their rendezvous point, but the weight of what she had uncovered, the power, the danger, the legacy of humanity's past, felt like an anchor around her chest. The Armada wasn't just a historical artifact. It was a weapon, a force of unimaginable destruction, and if it fell into the wrong hands, it could shift the balance of power in the entire galaxy. As they approached the edge of their ship's communication range, something flickered on her sensor screen. A single blip. At first, it seemed insignificant, just another minor anomaly. But as the signal grew closer, it became clear. They were being followed. "Captain," Ross said, her voice tight. "I got a contact. It's not one of ours." Kira's grip tightened on the controls. She could see the faint outlines of 3 ships, large, sleek, and aggressive in shape, tracking their movements. They were closing in fast. "Is it them?" Kira asked, her heart racing. "The ships we encountered on the ground." Ross didn't need to answer. The ship's weapons systems powered up, their energy signatures flaring bright on Kira's screen. The chase had begun. "Hang on," Kira shouted, slamming the throttle forward. The shuttle lurched, racing toward the nearest jump gate, but the mysterious ships were faster, their weapons already charging. The first blast hit, a beam of searing energy that rocked the shuttle violently, sending it spiraling off course. "Brace for impact," Kira shouted, desperately trying to regain control. They were outgunned, and the enemy was closing in fast. Kira's only hope now was to survive long enough to unlock the secrets of the Armada and figure out just who was hunting them, and why. "You said." The shuttle's hull groaned under the strain of the blast. Sparks flew from the control panel, and Kira's hands shook with the effort of trying to keep the craft steady. The mysterious ships pursuing them weren't just fast. They were precise, their weapons calibrated to tear through the shuttle's weak defenses. Her mind raced as she fought the urge to panic. The Armada was out there, an ancient weapon of unimaginable power, but right now, her team had to survive this. "Captain, we've got a breach in the aft compartment," Ross shouted, voice strained. "We're losing pressure." Kira gritted her teeth. She could feel the shuttle's stability crumbling. She wasn't sure how much longer it would hold together. "Cut the power to the rear thrusters," Kira barked. "It's the only way we can outmaneuver them." Ross nodded and scrambled to execute the order. Kira's eyes darted over the controls, trying to anticipate the enemy's next move. The pursuing ships were closing in rapidly, their engines glowing with deadly intent. Every second counted. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," Kira shouted, her voice firm despite the chaos around her. The shuttle shuddered again as another blast rang out, narrowly missing them. Her stomach dropped, but she didn't flinch. They were running out of time. "We're not going to outrun them," Keller said from the comms, his voice tight with fear. "We need a plan." Kira's mind raced through their options, but there were no good choices. The jump gate was still too far. The enemy ships were too fast, and even with the shuttle's speed, they wouldn't be able to make it. If they didn't do something drastic, they'd be caught, and possibly destroyed, before they ever made it to safety. Then something clicked in her mind. "Pull up the data on the Armada's location," she ordered, voice steady, but with an urgency that couldn't be ignored. "We need to get back to the ruins. Now." "What? Captain, are you?" Ross began to protest, but Kira cut her off. "The Armada," Kira said, her tone cold, resolute. "It's our only shot." The team was silent for a beat, the severity of her words sinking in. Kira knew they didn't have the luxury of time. If those ships were after the Armada, there was a reason. Whoever was controlling them knew something they didn't. And if the enemy had figured out how to tap into the Armada's power, they could be walking into the deadliest trap the galaxy had ever seen. Kira's fingers flew across the console, pulling up the coordinates they'd extracted from the ruins. They were still several hours from the site, but if they could make it back there, they might be able to force a standoff. The Armada's ships, dormant but intact, had vast, hidden capabilities. But Kira knew something else. Those ships, if awakened, weren't just weapons. They were linked to the ancient history of humanity itself. Their secrets could be the key to turning the tide of this battle. "Get us there," Kira said, meeting Keller's eyes. "Now." Ross adjusted their course, and the shuttle veered hard, diving toward the planet's surface. The enemy ships pursued with terrifying speed, but now they had the advantage. Kira had no intention of being caught in the open. They would have to come closer if they wanted to finish the job, and when they did, she'd be ready. As they descended into the planet's atmosphere, the shuttle rattled against the pressure, but Kira's focus was unwavering. Her team had no choice but to trust her now. The Armada's secrets were still hidden beneath the surface, and she was beginning to believe that unlocking them was their only hope of survival. The shuttle broke through the cloud cover, the ruins in sight. But what awaited them wasn't just the ancient weaponry of the past. It was the dawning realization that humanity's legacy, for better or worse, was about to be revealed in full. And Kira wasn't sure whether they were ready for what that might mean. "Hold tight," Kira said, as they approached the ancient site. "This is about to get interesting." The shuttle descended lower, the looming shadows of the Armada's ships just beneath the surface, waiting for their command. "You said." The shuttle skidded toward the landing pad with a jarring thud as it touched down, the hull groaning in protest from the impact. Kira quickly unstrapped herself, her boots hitting the metal floor as she scrambled to the hatch. She could feel the tension in the air, the very weight of history pressing down on them. The ruins were now more than just remnants of an ancient civilization. They were a ticking time bomb, a weapon that had been dormant for millennia, but was now beginning to stir. "Everyone, out," Kira commanded, her voice sharp and focused. "We don't have much time." Ross, Keller, and the rest of the team rushed to comply, gathering their equipment in haste. They knew what was at stake. The Armada was more than a legend. It was real, and it was powerful. But what did it mean for humanity's future? Would they wield it, or would they become its next victims? Kira was the last to leave the shuttle, stepping out onto the rocky platform beneath a sky filled with swirling clouds. The air was thick with the promise of a storm, but there was no time to waste. She motioned for the team to follow her as they made their way toward the massive ruins just beyond the landing pad. The structures were jagged and ancient, worn by time but still impressive in their scale. It was clear that the beings who had constructed this place had once commanded unimaginable power. A strange feeling of unease settled over Kira as she approached the central chamber, the place where the Armada's ships were rumored to be buried. The records had been vague on the specifics, but one thing was certain. The ships were not just weapons. They were part of a larger whole, a system built to dominate entire star systems. The more Kira thought about it, the more the implications seemed to weigh on her. "Captain, there's something off about the readings," Ross said, voice trembling slightly. She was standing near a glowing console embedded in the stone wall, her fingers hovering over the surface. "What do you mean?" Kira asked, turning toward her. Ross swallowed hard, her brow furrowed with confusion. "The energy signature. It's not just from the Armada. It's different. It's like someone is trying to communicate with us." Kira felt a chill run down her spine. Could it be? Could something else be controlling the Armada? She moved quickly to Ross's side, examining the data herself. The energy pulses were faint but undeniable, like a long-forgotten signal trying to find its way back to its source. "Run a full scan," Kira ordered. "Let's see if we can trace it." Ross complied, her fingers tapping across the console as the scan began. The screen flashed to life, revealing a series of cryptic symbols and patterns, alien in origin, but familiar in structure. Kira leaned in closer, heart pounding in her chest. Then the symbols began to shift, reforming into a coherent message. "The Armada lives." The words echoed through Kira's mind, reverberating with an eerie finality. The message wasn't just a signal, it was a declaration. Whoever, or whatever, was behind this knew about the Armada, and they were watching them. Worse yet, the message wasn't just old, it was active, sent with purpose. "Do you see that?" Kira asked, her voice low, barely a whisper. "It's a warning." Before Ross could respond, another blast rang out, this one much closer. The ground trembled beneath them, a violent shockwave rippling through the stone structure. Kira's heart skipped a beat as she realized they weren't alone anymore. The enemy ships had found them. But there was something different this time. The blasts weren't coming from above. "Take cover," Kira shouted, diving toward the nearest wall as debris rained down from the ceiling. Her team scrambled for shelter as the walls shuddered and cracked. The threat had shifted. They weren't just dealing with unknown forces in space anymore. Someone, was here on the ground with them, and they weren't going to let them leave. The pulses of energy from the Armada continued to flicker in the background, their eerie glow casting long shadows across the ruins. But now, Kira knew one thing for certain. The Armada wasn't just a weapon of war, it was a beacon, and they weren't the only ones who had heard its call. "We need to get out of here now," Kira shouted over the chaos, her voice cutting through the storm of debris. But as she turned to lead her team to safety, another message flashed across the screen, a new signal, one that was far more troubling than the last. The Armada must not rise. This time, the warning came with a chilling sense of urgency. The walls of the chamber trembled as the energy pulses from the Armada's ships intensified. Dust and rubble cascaded from the ceiling, stinging Kira's face as she crouched low behind a crumbling pillar. The blast had been close, too close, and now the air was thick with the oppressive tension of something ancient and dangerous stirring from the depths of the planet. "We're not alone," Kira muttered, scanning the shadows. The message on the console had been clear. The Armada must not rise. But who or what was preventing it? And why had they chosen this moment to strike? "Captain," Ross's voice rang out, panic seeping through the calm facade. They're here. The enemy, on the ground. Kira's pulse quickened as she turned toward the direction Ross had indicated. Her eyes narrowed. A shadow flitted across the opposite wall, too quick, too deliberate to be a simple trick of the light. They were surrounded. The enemy was not just attacking from the skies. They had infiltrated the ruins. "Get to the transport bay," Kira ordered, her voice firm. "Now. We'll regroup there." The team scrambled to their feet, moving with urgency. But as Kira turned to make her way through the ruined chamber, a deep, rumbling growl echoed through the air, reverberating through the stone walls. It wasn't just a noise. It was a presence. The sound was close, too close. Suddenly, a cloaked figure emerged from the shadows. It moved with unsettling grace, its outline hazy and indistinct in the dim light. Kira's breath caught in her throat. The figure wasn't human. It was something else. Its form shifted like liquid, a shifting mass of dark tendrils that seemed to fade and reform with each step. The air around it crackled with energy, an unnatural charge that made the hairs on the back of Kira's neck stand on end. "Stay back," Kira shouted, reaching for her sidearm. But before she could draw it, the figure spoke, its voice like a hiss, low and guttural. "Foolish humans," it rasped, "you have awoken what should never have risen." Kira's blood ran cold. The voice was ancient, primal, and filled with a venomous warning. The figure stepped forward, its shape becoming more solid, more defined. As it did, Kira saw its eyes, glowing with a faint, sickly green light. It wasn't just an enemy. It was something ancient, something tied to the ruins themselves. "What are you?" Kira demanded, her pulse racing. She had faced aliens before, but this was different. This was something beyond their understanding. The figure tilted its head, almost as if it was amused by her question. "We are the Wardens," it said, its voice echoing with the weight of centuries. "We guard the power of the Armada. You have trespassed into sacred ground, and for that, you will pay the price." Kira's mind raced, trying to make sense of the encounter. The Wardens, guardians of the Armada. Had they been waiting all this time, protecting the ships from anyone who might try to awaken them? Were they the ones who had sent the warning? Before she could process any more, a sudden explosion rocked the chamber. The ground beneath her feet cracked open, sending a cascade of debris and dust into the air. Kira's heart hammered in her chest as she ducked instinctively, covering her head. The Wardens were no longer alone. Other shapes emerged from the darkness, their forms just as indistinct, just as deadly. "We have to move," Keller yelled, his voice strained with panic. "This place is coming apart." Kira didn't hesitate. She grabbed Ross's arm and pulled her toward the nearest exit. The rest of the team followed, but the Wardens were already closing in, their unnatural movements making it impossible to tell which direction they would strike from next. Kira's mind was a blur. The Wardens, the Armada, and the cryptic messages were all tangled together, now in a way she couldn't yet fully understand. But one thing was clear. Humanity's involvement in this ancient conflict was no accident. The Armada's power was real, and so were the forces trying to keep it from rising again. As they reached the exit, a series of explosions sounded in rapid succession, lighting up the ruins in bursts of fiery light. The enemy was closing in, and the Wardens were not far behind. Kira's heart raced with the realization that this wasn't just about surviving anymore. This was about unraveling the truth and stopping whatever dark force was tied to the Armada from awakening once and for all. The chase had begun, and the stakes were higher than ever. The ground shook beneath their feet as Kira and her team sprinted through the ruined corridors. The explosions had rocked the structure, sending clouds of dust and debris into the air. But they couldn't stop now. The Wardens were closing in, their unnatural movements almost inescapable, a threat that seemed to materialize out of thin air. Kira's heart pounded in her chest, but she pushed the fear aside. They had no time for hesitation. If they didn't get out of here and understand what was really happening, they would all be trapped in the ruins forever. The transport bay was only a few hundred meters away, but every corner seemed to bring more danger. As they rounded a bend in the hallway, Kira could hear the warden's voices echoing in the distance, low, haunting, and filled with contempt. "The Armada must never rise," one of the wardens hissed, its voice echoing through the crumbling walls. "You cannot comprehend the destruction you will bring." Kira didn't stop to analyze the cryptic words. They needed to escape first, then regroup, then make sense of everything. As they reached the entrance to the transport bay, Kira turned to see Ross struggling to keep up, her face flushed with panic. "Come on, Ross. We're almost there," Kira urged, reaching back to grab her colleague's arm. But before they could make it to the bay, another blast erupted from the far side of the chamber, knocking the shuttle's door off its hinges. "We're trapped," Keller shouted, his voice full of dread as he scanned the room. "They're cutting us off." Kira's mind raced as she assessed their options. The wardens were coming from every direction, their eerie forms filling the space. There was no escape through the front, and their only route back to the shuttle was blocked. For a moment, panic surged, but Kira fought it down. She knew the only way out was through the ruins, through the hidden truths that lay beneath their feet. "Stay calm," Kira ordered, taking a deep breath. "We've got one option left. We head deeper into the ruins. The main chamber, the heart of the Armada, might give us a chance to fight back." "I'm not sure we can fight them," Ross said, her voice shaky, but determination flashing in her eyes. "They're not like anything we faced before. If they've been guarding this place for thousands of years." "I know," Kira said, cutting her off. "But it's the only chance we've got." Without waiting for further protests, Kira led the way into the depths of the ruins. The air grew colder as they descended, and the walls seemed to close in around them. The remnants of a long-forgotten civilization stretched out before them. Massive doors, ancient machinery, and strange carvings that seemed to pulse with a faint energy. And then, at the heart of it all, they saw it. A colossal chamber lay ahead, its walls covered in symbols, glowing faintly with an eerie light. At its center, raised upon a massive platform, was a ship unlike any Kira had ever seen. It was not just an ancient warship, it was alive, its sleek form glowing with an otherworldly energy. The ship's surface shifted and rippled like liquid metal, reacting to the energy in the room. It wasn't just a vessel, it was an extension of the ruins, an integral part of the Armada. Kira's breath caught as the full implications of what she was seeing hit her. This ship, this thing, was a part of something far larger. A weapon, yes, but also something far more complicated. It was more than just a machine. It was a living entity, a creation of an ancient intelligence that had been left dormant for too long. And the wardens were not simply protecting it. They were serving it. "We've uncovered a weapon of unimaginable power," Keller whispered, his eyes wide as he took in the sight. "But this isn't just technology. It's alive. The Armada itself is a sentient force." Kira's mind raced. The ship, the ruins, the wardens, all of it was tied together by something far older than humanity. The Armada wasn't just a fleet of warships, it was an interconnected system, one that operated as a single collective entity. Whoever controlled it could bend the galaxy to their will. But the wardens weren't here to protect humanity from the Armada. They were here to keep it from awakening. They understood that its power was so immense, so dangerous, that the galaxy itself could fall under its control. And now Kira knew the truth. The Armada wasn't just a relic of the past. It was the key to the future, and perhaps the downfall of everyone who sought to control it. "We need to find a way to activate it," Kira said, her voice steady despite the weight of the revelation. "We need to understand how it works, before they do." As the wardens drew closer, their figures shifting in the shadows, Kira knew one thing for certain. The real fight had just begun. The chamber felt alive around them, the hum of energy pulsing in the walls like a heartbeat. Kira's eyes never left the living ship at the center of the room, its form shifting with an unsettling fluidity, as though it were aware of their presence. The wardens, too, were closing in, their ethereal forms casting long, jagged shadows across the room. Kira could feel the weight of their gaze, an almost suffocating pressure that seemed to bind her to the spot. "They'll never let us activate it," Russ said quietly, fear creeping into her voice as she eyed the wardens. "They've been guarding this place for millennia. Why now? What's changed?" Kira shook her head, her thoughts moving at lightning speed. The warden's actions weren't just about protecting the Armada. They were trying to stop its power from being used, and they were willing to do anything to prevent that. But the truth was undeniable. The Armada had been dormant for too long, and its potential was too vast. No one, not even the wardens, could keep it buried forever. "We don't have a choice," Kira said firmly. "If they want to stop us, they'll have to kill us. We have to activate the ship. We need to control it before they do." The team was silent, each member weighed down by the gravity of Kira's words. But they knew she was right. This was bigger than survival now. This was about seizing the future, one that had been lost to the galaxy for eons. If they could unlock the secrets of the Armada and harness its power, it could shift the balance of the galaxy. And if they failed, the wardens would make sure it stayed locked away forever, ensuring that no one would ever threaten their ancient control. With a deep breath, Kira stepped toward the ship. Its surface rippled as she approached, the metallic skin responding to her presence as though it were alive. The symbols on the walls around them began to glow brighter, the air growing heavier with each passing second. She reached out, her hand trembling slightly as she touched the ship's surface. The moment her fingers made contact, a sudden surge of energy shot through her body, and she recoiled, gasping for air. But the ship didn't reject her. Instead, it seemed to recognize her. The energy flowed through her veins, a pulse of ancient power, and a voice echoed in her mind. "You are the inheritor." Kira's heart raced. Inheritor. What did that mean? Was this ship speaking to her directly? She felt a deep, unsettling connection to it, like an ancient force that had been waiting for her touch. The wardens, too, reacted, advancing on her with alarming speed, their glowing eyes narrowing in fury. "We cannot allow this," one of them hissed, its voice distorted, filled with centuries of anger. "The Armada belongs to no one. It will remain dormant, as it should." Kira stepped back, her mind reeling. "Why?" she demanded, her voice loud and defiant. "Why keep it hidden? What happened to the beings who built it?" The warden paused, its figure flickering in and out of clarity. They sought to control the stars. The Armada was not a tool. It was the key to dominance. But it was a mistake that nearly destroyed everything. We were sent to prevent its return. Kira's eyes narrowed as she pieced together the fragments of the warden's cryptic explanation. The Armada was more than just a weapon. It was a force meant to control, to reshape the galaxy. The beings who created it had realized the mistake too late, and in their desperation, they had hidden it away, leaving behind the wardens to guard it. The galaxy had been spared a catastrophe, but only at the cost of sealing away one of the most dangerous forces in existence. Then why now? Kira pressed, stepping forward again, her hand brushing the ship's surface once more. "What's changed?" The warden hesitated, its form flickering with indecision. "You," it said, its voice cold with realization. "The descendants of those who once wielded the Armada have returned. You are the inheritors. You are the ones who will either bring about its destruction or salvation." A shiver ran down Kira's spine as the words settled in. The Armada hadn't been lost. It had been waiting for someone who could unlock its secrets, someone who could wield its power. And now that they had found it, the galaxy stood on the brink of something monumental. Before she could process the enormity of what she had just learned, the wardens surged forward, their forms solidifying into terrifying clarity. They would stop her, and they would stop anyone else from ever using the Armada. Kira's fingers clenched around the ship's surface. It was time. She would either seize control of this ancient power or perish with it. "Everyone, get ready," Kira shouted, her voice cutting through the tension. "We fight for control of the Armada." The battle for the galaxy had just begun. The air in the chamber was thick with tension. The wardens, their forms now fully solidified, advanced on Kira and her team with a relentless, almost predatory precision. Their glowing eyes flickered with ancient rage, each movement rippling through the air like a wave of dread. They would not let the Armada rise again, not while they still drew breath. Kira's pulse raced, but she stood her ground, her fingers still pressed against the living ship. The connection between her and the Armada was growing stronger, the pulse of energy flowing through her veins, coiling through her thoughts like a living thing. She could feel its power, its potential, and its warning. Control it, or it will control you. The wardens didn't give her time to contemplate. With a scream that reverberated through the chamber, the first warden lunged, its form blurring as it moved toward her. Kira ducked, rolling out of the way just in time, and drew her sidearm, firing a shot that cracked through the air. But the warden merely flickered, its form distorting and reassembling before her eyes. "It's no use," Ross shouted from behind, firing her own weapon, but her shots disappeared into the warden's shifting body. "Their bodies are fluid. They're not solid." Kira's eyes flicked to the rest of her team. Keller, always the strategist, was already analyzing their surroundings, his hand gripping the rifle tightly as he backed away toward the far side of the chamber. "We need to disrupt their form," he called out, his voice sharp. "Use heat, energy weapons." The wardens continued their assault, their forms flickering in and out of existence, each attack a blur. But Kira had no time to think about their strategy. Her hand was still pressed to the ship, and a surge of energy pulsed through her, overwhelming her senses. She gasped for breath as the voices returned, louder now, echoing through her mind. "You are the inheritor. You are the one who will decide the fate of the Armada." It was overwhelming. The knowledge, the power, the weight of it all was crashing over her. But Kira refused to let it consume her. She had to fight, had to control it. "Everyone, fall back," Kira shouted, her voice strained as she staggered to her feet. "Move toward the central pillar. Get closer to the heart of the ship." The team obeyed without question, falling into formation and retreating toward the center of the room. The wardens, relentless as they were, followed closely, their ethereal forms stretching as they closed in. But Kira could feel it now, the heartbeat of the ship pulsing beneath her skin, resonating in her chest. A deep booming hum filled the chamber, reverberating through the air. The walls of the room began to crack and groan, as if the entire structure were waking up. The ship, the Armada, was coming to life, and with it, the power to break the warden's assault. "Now," Kira cried, her voice a mix of determination and desperation. She thrust her palm out, aiming her hand toward the glowing core of the ship. The energy inside her surged, and she focused, directing it at the central pillar. In an instant, the ship responded. The energy that had been flowing through Kira's body shot out from her, enveloping the entire room in a brilliant, blinding light. The wardens shrieked, their forms warping violently as the pulse of energy hit them, destabilizing their molecular structures. One by one, the wardens began to falter, their bodies flickering uncontrollably, as if the energy was tearing them apart at the atomic level. The room trembled, and the ship's form began to solidify into something more stable, more real. Its surface rippled and glowed, now a deep, radiant blue. The Armada was awakening in full. The ship was alive in a way that no one could have imagined, a colossal entity of vast intelligence, power, and potential. The wardens, though fierce, could not withstand the force that Kira had unlocked. One by one, they disintegrated, their forms flickering out of existence like fading shadows, until only silence remained. Kira stood in the center of the chamber, her hand still extended toward the glowing ship, breathing heavily, sweat dripping from her brow. Her mind buzzed with new information, with new power. She had done it. The Armada had awakened, and she was now its master. But as the realization settled, so did a new chilling understanding. The Wardens had been right in one sense. The Armada could reshape the galaxy, but not without consequences. "Is it over?" Keller asked, his voice uncertain, his eyes scanning the room as the last of the Wardens faded into nothingness. Kira turned to face her team. Her mind was still racing with the possibilities, the weight of the choice now in her hands. "No," she said softly, her voice filled with both awe and dread. "It's just beginning." The Armada had been unleashed, but its future, and humanity's, was now in her hands. The true battle for the galaxy was only starting.